Milltown Minutes is a companion web series to the upcoming feature-length film Milltown, directed and produced by Genevieve Belcher. Milltown focuses on the small town of West Warwick in Kent County, Rhode Island. As part of what is known as the Pawtuxet Valley, West Warwick played a major role in the Industrial Revolution alongside its neighbors, Warwick and Coventry. The following Milltown Minutes video gives a glimpse into the rich history of this area. When we examine the origins of the Industrial Revolution, we find that it has its roots in England. They were the first to create successful textile mills used for mass manufacture of cotton goods in the 1760s. Because this industry brought so much prosperity to England, they did not want to share their patented machinery or skilled workers with the rest of the world. Americans wanted to have the same successful textile industry as England. They knew they had what it takes. If only they could figure out how the machines worked, they could also flourish. There were many people who tried and failed to build a successful textile mill in America. But then a man came along who changed everything. Known as the father of the American Industrial Revolution, a phrase purportedly coined by President Andrew Jackson, he was conversely known in England as Slater the Traitor. What did he do to earn such a name?
Slater was a master mechanic, and he built these textile machines, mainly spinning machines, to take cotton and make it into yarn. And he had all this wherewithal up in his head. And the British knew that he had a lot of information. But Samuel could see in the future that he could use his knowledge better in the United States. But the British would not let him leave. So the British said they put an embargo on men who had the textile knowledge. So Samuel wanted to come to the United States so bad that he posed incognito as a sailor and sailed to New York. And he worked in New York for just a short time. And while he was working in New York, he ran into a man by the name of Moses Brown. And Moses Brown knew they had a wonderful waterfall at Pawtucket.
Moses Brown was one of the wealthiest men in New England. He had come from a wealthy family that was involved in a variety of merchant activities. He was also an industrialist who had made his money in the slave trade and was ready to move on to something new that piqued his interest: manufacturing cotton. The combination of his financial backing and Samuel Slater's knowledge were a recipe for success.
And so Moses and another gentleman, his son-in-law actually, named William Almy, had been involved with trying to start a mill and spinning cotton here. And they weren't successful because they didn't have the knowledge of how to do it. So Samuel Slater shows up, and he becomes a partner with them, Almy, Brown, and Slater. And they form a mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and it was which is called Slater Mill. It was a small wooden structure built in 1793, where they used a system which became known as the Rhode Island system. And the Rhode Island system impacts all of Rhode Island's mills from that point forward. The Rhode Island system is where you hire families. It's not just one person. You go looking, and you bring a family in to do the work. And they built houses for them. They used young children because it was very common in England to do that. So Samuel brought the tradition with him. At the time, in the early 1800s, Warwick would have been very agricultural. You would have had a few factories for manufacturing, grinding corn, sawmills, little things, but not with the coming of the building of the mill in Centerville, the building of the Lippet mill. You needed workers, so they were starting to advertise for workers, and they were bringing people out of Slater Mill to come down to work here because the pay was a little higher. So some of the families from the Pawtuxet Valley area, which in Warwick, which was eventually would become West Warwick, were the Arnolds, a gentleman named Perez Peck, who had been born in Rehoboth but lived in Providence and then moved to Coventry in the 1820s, and with his brother and his son-in-law, they actually went up to Slater Mill and saw the machines running to try to figure out how to build their own machinery, so that when they were helped to supply the valley with its own machines, the textile mills down in the valley. And so it's sort of like what Slater did in England. I guess you can say is that what Perez Peck was doing down here. But as people went to work up there, it changed whole communities.